My name is Anni Sandgren. I'm the CSR and Sustainability Manager for New Way Group. I'm located in Gothenburg at the headquarters, and I'm basically working with all our different concepts and companies within the group. So I'm the one sitting in the middle with all the questions you can throw into the sustainability field. And I function a lot as a link between our companies and our sourcing offices. So you know they are a big part of our group strategy, and I'm somewhere in between them and our companies. Starting on a really overall level, I want to mention the UN Global Goals for Sustainable Development and how our work with sustainability are linked with these goals. Obviously, our ultimate goal is to maximize our contribution to these goals within our context. All these goals are interrelated, but for 4 of them, we consider we can make more significant contribution. And this is first goal number 8, decent work and economic growth. Here, we link our work with ensuring good working conditions, both in our own operations, but also and especially in the global supply chains, where there are quite some challenges. Then we have goal number 12, responsible consumption and production. Here, we put the work with developing more sustainable products and worked in production processes, but also work actively to spread the knowledge and information about sustainable consumption. A big part of my role is to be present with our different companies and also with clients to speak about responsible consumption, to increase the knowledge overall in these types of questions. Goal number 13, climate action. And here we link the work with decrease the indirect emissions especially from production phase, but also from transportations by choosing more eco-friendly fuels and improved vessels. But the prerequisite for all of these goals, and perhaps the most important one, is goal number 17, partnerships for the goals. And so we are super dependent to work together with others brands within our different markets, and also different stakeholders around us for these goals and work together. Otherwise, we will not be able to make a significant impact if we're all running in 10 different ways. We need to run in one direction together. The work is packaged and communicated in our sustainability report. And this really works as a framework for all our different companies and concepts on what they should prioritize with their respective work. And it's very clear that the focus areas is where we can make the most impact and also that is highly valued by our stakeholders. And that is especially climate impact from products and in production, social responsibility in a global supply chain, and also reduced emissions, obviously, from both production and transportation. So this is something we have published every year together with the annual report. But right now it's happening a lot in terms of reporting. We are preparing very much for the CSRD legislation. We will see already for this year's report quite some changes, but I think it's more work going on in the background to be prepared for 2024 reporting. But now, this week, we got some indications that it might be implemented 1 year later in Sweden, so we will see what happens with that. But we will continue to work to be ready for full CSRD reporting for 2024 year. So that will include full scope 1 to 3 emission reporting. And we have big internal discussions right now with the target setting and reductions plans. And a lot is around information management and how we can implement and how we are implementing necessary system support to be able to manage all this information that is needed from different perspectives, both for reporting, but also from customer demand around traceability, transparency, and so on. So a lot of work going on because of the legal frameworks that are shifting and changing. I also want to add, like, overall, I mean, the big picture and the big analysis we have in place. We know where we must prioritize. But right now, it's really a question about also formalizing this. We are a big group. We have many big different concepts and different types of brands. So it's really finding our way to formulate that in a good way that covers the whole group. Some highlights from 2023 that we can just lift is we have been quite good throughout the group to develop more products with what we call sustainability attributes. For example, what we include in that is a product made of recycled polyester or organic cotton. And it's a really clear shift towards these types of materials. Also pushed from customer demands. We see that customers want this to a larger extent. And as I mentioned, we are working a lot with implementation of necessary system support for sustainability reporting, but also for how to calculate the emissions and measure them. It's quite complex because also lacking of standards of how we should actually do it and what will be the requirements for these types of calculations. But we're now in the mapping phase of the total emissions so that we will be able to formalize the targets in a more structured way. We are seeing really good improvements in the supply chain regarding social audits. What I refer to here is social audits done by third parties at our different manufacturing units. And we can see that they are really improving their grades. So we have a good coverage of these audits, but we can really see that they're also improving the grades overall, which is a good sign of that it's going in the right direction out there. We have several good examples and initiatives from the different concepts for packaging, for plastics, and I mean, they're really good at coming up with different good initiatives right now. And this is a really classical one if you're talking about garments. Very often, a garment is packed in a single poly bag to protect the garment during transportation, and then it's single use, and then you throw it away. So now, instead of using these single packed garments, whenever possible, we have multi-pack, for example, pack them together. They don't need to be single. If it's not a must to protect the garment, whenever possible, try to pack together. So that was just some examples of smart initiatives going out there. Also, looking at our operations in offices and warehouses and so on, we see, as it's in general in society right now, a clear shift towards electrification of a company car fleet. So some highlights. There will come some more highlights when we publish the report together with the annual report. So continue to the very core of this presentation, and also where we have the biggest impact from a group perspective, namely the climate impact from products and production. First of all materials have advantages and disadvantages from a sustainability perspective. If you want to measure or consider the impact on humans and the environment, you must assess this from a life cycle perspective. How big is the impact from the actual raw material to the production, transportation, and the user phase? Very often, when we think about now I talk a lot about the garments and textile industry, we think about materials. And we really often get stuck in the material question, so which material is better than the other. But, I mean, all materials have advantages and disadvantages. To be able to compare, you must lift it up on a life cycle perspective. To go through this example, because actually the fact is that 80% of a garment's climate impact comes from the production phase. Now, Jonas, you're in my presentation as well. Yeah, so 80% is in the production phase. And as you can see as a comparison, 80% in production, then you have 3% in distribution and retail, which is actually the long-distance transportation. Quite often when you talk about emissions, you think about transportations and so on. And yes, of course, it must have a huge impact. And it does have some impact. But compared to where the big pie is relatively small. The user transportation phase, it's a bit higher. It's these single transportations, like one person taking one car, going and buying the product. So it gives you a little bit more. And then the user phase and end-of-life phase. But most significant, the production phase. And if you divide the production phase and see how it's split, you have the fiber production here. It's 16%. So yes, significant and important to work with materials, definitely. But still, it's only 16% of the total impact. So this gives us the point out the importance that we work with the whole pie and not just with one part. And this is mainly driven because the use of fossil fuels in these processes. So what type of energy is used in these different facilities doing the yarn production, fabric production? And what also really stands out is the wet treatment in the fabric production phase, meaning that what is called Tier 2 is normally what you call the fabric mills and that part of the production chain. They basically have the biggest share of the impact. So for us, then, it's really important to work with the energy question. Of course, work with CMT. It stands for cut, make, and trim, so the sewing section. So definitely important to work with the sewing section, which is our tier ones, normally like the direct business partners. But also really, really important to work with the fabrics. And we have a good advantage because we work a lot with nominated fabrics. So we also have a lot of direct business relationships with these fabric mills, which is a really good advantage when working with emission reductions onwards. So this is what the research says. What's the most important things from a climate impact perspective? The most important thing we can do as individuals and being to help this along the way. Prolonging the active lifetime of a garment by 2, that is using the garments in its intended form twice as many times as the average, it will decrease the climate impact by almost half, almost 50%. So doubling the user phase, half impact. So for this, it obviously means, comes down to a quality question, producing garments of high quality or durable quality, and also down to a discussion about demand and function, that we offer our clients the correct product for the correct occasion, so to speak. So the production is actually used. So a big part of need analysis in client discussions to see, okay, so what's the desired function? And then you go from there when choosing what type of product to suggest in these specific cases. Adding to this, prolonging the lifetime by 2, and then also producing the garments using solar-powered energy or renewable energies. It will mean a reduction by 67%. Pointing out it's really important that we work with the energy question along the value chain. Also adding to the quotation, a consumer that bikes or walks to the store instead of taking these cars means a total impact decrease by 78%. So it's quite clear we're in this boat together, and it's really a system change that is needed in terms of talking from a textile industry in a big picture. So what does this mean for us then, and what are we doing? Well, to summarize once again, the greatest impact, of course, in the production, and is largely due to the use of fossil fuels. So to get there and to work with the improvements, we really must work together with our business partners and engage in partnerships and collaborations. We work with a framework called Amfori-BEPI. Amfori is also the network we're in for the social monitoring program. I will come to that later. But they also have one part for the environmental assessments. So this is something which is also really good because we're already working with Amfori for the social part. Now we're adding the other part of Amfori for the environmental assessments and can align that in the same platforms. So right now it's a lot about measuring within this framework and also including it in all the discussions with our suppliers to increase the awareness, to try to see whenever it's possible for them and what's hindering them for renewable energy and so on. So right now it's really a work of implementing it in our policies, in our discussions, and trying to find ways together with our suppliers for switching to renewables. Could also be quite different depending on which country you're in. Different countries have different prerequisites for switching to renewables. If you take, for example, Bangladesh, where you have the factories are really often quite small on the area, but really, really high. So then it doesn't really make sense to set just a couple of solar panels on the top to try to serve 7 buildings of production floors. So that's not really makes sense. If you compare, for example, to India, where we have very often really flat and wide factories, so it's a great opportunity for solar panels, and the payoff is really quick. So there you already have a lot of solar panels to a large extent. So it's really about this discovering the challenges and opportunities, also country-based, to drive the development. We also see a lot of requirements is also coming from different governments around. See a huge development in both China and in Bangladesh for higher requirements as well to include renewables in the energy mix, which will have direct impact on our total emissions as well, since it's counted as our indirect emissions. Yes. So in this work, for reduced climate impact, our purchasing offices really plays a key role. We have our own offices in China, in Bangladesh, India, Vietnam, and also newly opened in Egypt. And having this direct relationship with suppliers, and not only the tier 1, but also to a large extent the tier 2 fabric mill suppliers, really gives us the opportunity to be close and have that type of dialogues instead of acting through agents and being further away from the actual production. So examples of work together with our suppliers could be one part, of course, the materials quality product development part, use of renewable energy in production, as I mentioned. Also requirements on water management, progressive work of chemicals is a big area when talking about textiles and other products. We also have the advantage, given our group structure, that we have the opportunity to coordinate so-called big buys for several concepts, meaning that we have the opportunity to buy higher volumes of fabrics with different types of sustainability attributes, for example, recycled polyester. And we can buy a big batch, and then the different concepts can share that buy, meaning that more of a concept can have more products with these types of materials, but still to a competitive price. So that's really an advantage from material discussion perspective as well. Yes, let's go into the social part a bit as well, how we work with social responsibility in the global supply chain. Once again, I want to point out our sourcing offices. They are really important in this work. And one of our biggest strengths is that we have our own CSR staff located in the offices visiting the factories. I mean, sharing language, culture really opens up for building trust with the suppliers, and so they have trust in us to also share their problems and have these types of discussions. And in addition to our own CSR staff, we have our own QC controllers, which is quality controllers, and they are more frequent out in the factories. So, like, just having these people on the ground on a really frequent basis is a very, obviously very good support for us in this work. When talking about monitoring and working for social standards in the supply chain, everything evolves around our code of conduct. And this is kind of our list of requirements that all our suppliers must follow. And this code of conduct is based on international frameworks as the ILO conventions and UN Declaration on Human Rights. For example, it involves fair remuneration, no child labor, and so on. I think you recognize this. The most important, one important part of this is that this code of conduct comes from the organization I mentioned before called Amfori and Amfori BCI. There are a lot of, especially in the textile markets, that are members of this organization. And when you become a member of this organization, you actually take the code of conduct from Amfori BI, and that's the one you're implementing, meaning that we are over, I think, almost 3,000 companies today that use the exact same code of conduct, use the exact same way to follow up that code of conduct among our suppliers, which makes it easier for the suppliers as well to know about the requirements, to know how how we're following up on this, which gives us biggest strength of when implementing. And the code of conduct, one part is that I mentioned, the internal inspection and the internal visits is also based on this code of conduct. And in addition to that, we have the external third-party audits. So there are external auditors coming to the factories and doing an audit based on this protocol. And that's what we call a social third-party audit, or it's resulting in that third-party audit. But it's not until that audit is done, the important work starts, when the non-compliances should be corrected, because there's always non-compliances. But this gives us the framework to work with that. So first there's an audit, and then you have the result, and then you have the corrective action plan, which is followed up, and then it's rolling on like this and based on continuous improvements. So I mean, we want we want to have non-compliances so we can work and we can improve. And that's also why it's we're not putting like strict requirements on grades, like all our factories should be B graded, because then you put the focus a bit on the wrong things. Then you put too much focus on the grade instead of the continuous improvement. I mean, for us, it's better to enroll a factory that it's perhaps C or perhaps D at the first stage, and then with this work, help them to improve. Then you have really contributed to improvement in these questions. And that's why also Amfori BCI is not a certificate. It's a commitment of continuous improvement when working with this. Some other initiatives I just want to mention that are important for us. The Accord on Fire and Building Safety in Bangladesh. Now it's actually changed name to the International Accord. And that was following the Rana Plaza disaster in 2012 in Bangladesh, where a factory collapsed in Bangladesh with thousands of people that missed their lives. And then this accord was established as a three-party agreement between the Bangladesh industry, the brands, and global trade unions. And during these years, it's been resulting in great improvements for safety, building and fire safety in the industry that wouldn't have been possible without this type of agreement. So since we have quite big office in Bangladesh and a big share of our volume produced in Bangladesh, is of course a really important initiative for us. Then we have also a Fair Labor Association. It's quite similar to Amfori BCI, but for US market, and that's through our Cutter & Buck company that we are members of the Fair Labor Association. CTPAT is perhaps not a typical social initiative, but it's also an American initiative that is more around safe containers and safe shipments. But still, it's more people from the outside having eyes on our production. That's why I lifted up here as well. And that was all I had prepared. So I would gladly open up for questions.
Thank you. Magnus Roman, Kepler Cheuvreux. I can start with asking about recycled nylon that you mentioned. Can you give any hints of the sort of premium price here compared to virgin?
You mean nylon or you mean polyester?
Polyester.
Yeah, I expected that because nylon is a small part. I mean, today it's developing quite fast. So right now it's not that huge price difference to choose recycled than not to. I think it would be rather a more interesting question in next phase, because today you use recycled PET bottles to do recycled polyester fibers. But there are quite ongoing discussions if the PET bottle industry wants their bottles themselves, and in that case we will have a shortage of PET bottles for textiles, and then we will have shortage of recycled polyester because it's dependent on these PET bottles as it is now. So right now it's not a big price difference, but I guess it depends on what's happening with the raw material in this case, which is PET bottles.
And then the follow-up with the second question is that you mentioned organic cotton, but you did not mention recycled cotton. And what's the reason for that? Do you not see that there is a supply in the market for recycled cotton?
Today, most of the recycled cotton is actually waste from the textile industry. So it's waste from cutting cotton for doing garments, and then you have waste, and then you take that and do new fibers of it. And that's the majority of the recycled cotton.
But that would be better than incinerating or landfilling that things that the industry is not selling, right?
Yes, definitely. But then we also have another big question, which is the textile recycling, like textile to textile recycling, which is still quite challenging and not so scalable as it is today.
So the reason that you are not procuring recycled cotton fibers into your production today, is that because it's at a too steep price premium, or is it that you feel that it's not recycled from used textiles but rather discarded, not sold textiles, and then you feel it's not sort of nice enough?
Today it's a combination of price and also quality, because also when you recycle a cotton fiber, you always make something with the strength, and cotton from the beginning already is not the strongest fiber. So if you have recycled cotton, you always do something with the quality. So it's a quality and definitely price discussion. But once again, now we're ending up in the material discussions and not taking the whole picture into account. So it always depends on what's the actual end product and what should it be used for.
I've heard from other clothing companies that one big thing is that they don't sell their clothes and then they scrap it. It could be huge volumes for some. Is that an issue for you, or are you keep it in stock and you always sell it?
I mean, we're in a given our company structure, we like stocks, so we don't have problems with having it lying on stock. And I think that makes us also differentiating us from the fashion industry, where you have more trend-sensitive products and you need to switch the stock. We don't. I mean, that's a great advantage for us also in the future. We don't have the need to have that turnaround on the stock because we have a lot of basic products that can live for long. It's not going out of trend, so it's sellable over a long time. And that's definitely a key part of the strategy onwards as well, and where we have a clear advantage compared to fashion.
So it's fair to say that you sell more or less all the clothes you buy in?
Yeah.
Good.
Also interesting that under coming regulation, you will not even be allowed to destroy that type of products and production.
Thank you. Stefan Olsson, Ålandsbanken. Looking at the customer part of this equation, which you showed, this is a rather small part, but are you contemplating any initiatives to, for example, second-hand trading of your goods or similar?
A lot of discussions about it, but it's a quite tricky one. Also, I think you're all aware about the discussions around H&M and turned out showed up in Aftonbladet and so on. I mean, it's one thing like that you arrange the collection, okay, but then what should we actually do with this? And we don't want to end it on export and you don't have control of what's happening next. So it's nothing that we have driven from group perspective, because we think it's rather a local or company-specific initiative. It's better that it's driven locally. So if you can find more a local partner, you know where it ends up and so on. So at this stage, we haven't driven the question on group level for that type of collection and distribution.
Carl-Johan Bonnier with DNB. Lot of discussion obviously by garment, but if you look at the home and giftware side, what kind of challenges do you have on that side?
Home furnishing, you have a lot of textiles as well, but I think the main challenge is around plastics and the plastic materials and a different type of plastic materials and chemicals in plastics, especially what's called food contact plastics, Sagaform and DJ plates and so on. I think that's where the most challenges are linked to materials. Okay, thank you very much.